For most high magnitude individuals, the people around them refuse to mirror them accurately out of fear of losing access. A lot of them experience abuse, rejection, and subjugation from a very, very young age. This level of inaccurate mirroring fractures their interiority, rendering them to a life of shrinking and amputating themselves just to be able to fit in the very rooms they have always been too big for. So I'm making this video to liberate you from those small rooms, and so you can be free to expand into the fullness and the magnitude and the complexity of all of who you are. Hi, I am the Wealth Priestess, and I awaken, initiate unprecedented leaders in originating founders into their wealth, and I give them the blueprints to execute their destinies. I am here to help you to stop trying to shrink your 100 million gallon vision into a 30 million gallon container, and to finally build the architecture that holds your unprecedented scale with ease without collapse or fracture. Anyways, let's get into today's video. Imagine if no one told the ocean how expansive she is. Imagine if no one was able to mirror her magnitude. How would she know who she is? Since she cannot witness herself without a mirror, she is damned to a life of taking on the projections of smaller bodies of water. They hold up a smaller mirror, and all they can see is one little wave within that little compact. Who would she think she is at the end of the day? Definitely not an accurate reading of her magnitude. She would think of herself as significantly insignificant, less than she is. This is what high magnitude individuals are faced with their entire lives. No one tells them how big they are. And then inevitably, they brush up against the small containments they were forced into. And then they are condemned and shamed for their bigness instead of being directed into the very rooms that could actually sustain and hold them. And so those with high magnitude learn this survival logic that says, if I make myself small enough or become helpful enough, I'll be safe and accepted. And so you learn to compress your energy into a tiny fraction. You amputated yourself and bled just to get through the door. And then the outcome has been the exact same. You were still left out, you were still misunderstood, you were still exiled, and you still collapsed. Eventually, this high magnitude individual will realize that the cost of admission to those small spaces was your own self-mutilation. And despite harming yourself just to get a seat at the table, the house fell down anyways. The rug was pulled from beneath you, irregardless of your efforts. It was barely even recognized. This is where that deep systemic exhaustion comes from. It is the fatigue of realizing that you spent maximum voltage trying to force a broken containment to hold you when it was never even intended to do that in the first place. Fragmentation is the act, process, or state of breaking something into smaller, disconnected pieces. It's when, instead of maintaining your wholeness of complexity and paradox, you break yourself off into pieces to survive. Each individual fragmentation of you can fit into the small compacts of people's mirrors. And so you grow up getting to know yourself through fragments. And people need you to be this small, don't get me wrong, because you at your full magnitude is harder to be managed, is harder to access, and harder to siphon from. So it is in their best interest to never tell you how big you are. When you expand, you become a threat to their egos. And let me make this very clear. Anyone who refuses to mirror you correctly in your full magnitude, they are being malicious, and they are being self-serving, and they are being selfish. Funnily enough, life is a bunch of fractals, so you do the very same thing to your own vision. Instead of creating from the expanse of it all, you fragment it into digestible pieces and try to communicate it with palatable language. So you call yourself a coach instead of a governor, or a founder instead of a world leader, or a singer instead of a future world-class Broadway star. I need you to understand that naming is the first principle of containment. Naming is very significant. In the beginning, God spoke and gave name to all that exists and that has come after. Naming is the first principle. It's the first form of containment. So when people try to shrink you by naming your bigness outside of what it is, that is their attempt to contain you, to harness you, to ground you into a reality that makes them comfortable. The only way to build containment for your full magnitude is to name it accurately. For you to say, I am a person of magnitude instead of I'm too much. This is why you watching my videos is important. That's why it's so important for you to recognize that you are a multi-venture founder. You are an unprecedented leader. You are a governor, an originator, a person of magnitude. These are all titles that I have made available for you that you may have not recognized beforehand, so that you can adequately and properly name yourself instead of taking on the projections of others, of people who need you small because their containment is too big to even stay in the presence of your magnitude. You have to stop accepting small containment from people who need you to need you to be small to feel regulated, who need you to be small to feel okay within themselves. The reflection that they're pointing back at you is wrong. Some people would rather break themselves as a mirror so that you can never, ever recognize who you are. I am a mirror that is big enough to reflect you. I promise you, it is my greatest desire for you to expand into the whole fullness and magnitude of all of who you are, and all multidimensionality, and every complexity, and every paradox. And so, if you are a person of magnitude, definitely stick around to watch my videos, because for a lot of people who have come across my path, this YouTube channel and my private work is the first time they were ever properly named. Don't settle for anything less than that. Not from me, not from anyone else. You deserved proper containment for your magnitude, and that first begins with naming. When you try to break down yourself into manageable, digestible pieces and give it names like that, that's fragmentation. There is a name for you that encompasses all of you. You don't have to take on the fragmented image that others try to distort to you. Imagine someone trying to hold a mirror to the ocean and try to convince her she's small. This is what happens to us all the time. If she looked into that mirror and judged herself, she would see herself according to the size of that mirror. When in reality, the ocean is so vast, God created the entire ocean to contain her. Are you not any more worthy of that same kind of containment? I'm calling in 25 unprecedented leaders, trailblazing founders, and governors and originators to join me July 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern to receive the blueprints to map and architect the containment structures that can actually hold the entirety of their wealth. My Originator's Wealth Cycle is a 3.5-hour-long structural diagnostic and mapping transmission built exclusively for the leaders and founders who have outgrown every traditional framework and containment because their magnitude surpasses all of it. By the end of this session, you will have the blueprints and the map to navigate and architect the exact containment structures you need to actualize the entirety of your wealth and vision with ease and sustainably without collapse. If you would like to apply, the link is down below. Anyways, I am Naomi Olatayo, the Wealth Priestess. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.